Okay, few more.
Yeah. Fabulous. Okay, should we make a start now? We've got a few people on the call.
Yeah.
Okay, so for everyone that's already logged in and here and present this Thursday morning, thank you so much for joining our first in the series of Meet the Expert. For those of you that don't already know me, I'm Sarah, the founder from ReWork Consulting. I launched ReWork a few years ago with some key aims, one of them being to take a fresh look at how we do procurement better, but also consultancy. That followed many years as an operator working in venues and then as a software supplier. One of the key areas that we're really passionate about at ReWork is helping suppliers, consultants and agencies that support our sector, because a lot of the resource available is often focused on the venues. Because ReWork is a people first tech consultancy, these webinars are focused on our key human skills. So not technology, but human skills. Those skills, I really hope that will be even more important to everyone in the increasing world of AI that we live in now. So today's session is focused on project management. Skills that I hope you all agree are really important to all of our roles, irrespective to the service you provide or the product you provide, or even the sector that you work in, and also really helpful for our own personal lives too, projects that we're managing. Before we get started, I wanted to thank everyone that's on the call or maybe couldn't even make it on the call today that helped us with the research for this webinar, which started, would you believe it, at the beginning of this year. It really helped to kind of focus in on the three main key subjects that we're talking about today that are commonly experienced by many of you. So before we get started and I introduce Simon to you, I just wanted to cover off some basic housekeeping. Please send any questions that you have through to Kath, who is top right here. She might not be your top right, but she's part of our ReWork team. She's going to be looking after timekeeping today, making sure that Simon and I don't go down a rabbit hole. But we'll keep all the questions that you have to the very end of the session. And on the post-event follow-up emails and communications, we'll send through like resources. We'll also send through the recording of this session. So all you need to do for the next 30 minutes or so is just sit back and listen, really. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our very first expert, project manager, Simon Berger. Welcome, Simon.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for the introduction.
Thank you so much for being our first guest. And I really want us to start off by a very quick intro. I'm very conscious that Kath's going to be sending me messages saying 5 minutes to go into the next session. So of an intro of you, your experience, and really what brought us together to this webinar today.
Sure. I mean, I think we first met in 2013, I think it was, wasn't it? So yeah, it seems like yesterday, but it was a long time ago now, the first project. But just a quick introduction to myself first, really. Yes, my name's Simon Berger. I have a project management consultancy called Cowshed Projects. I work out of the north of England, but I work all over the UK generally. The Cowshed Projects generally works in fit out in leisure experience and sort of museum and permanent exhibition design, but project management generally, in fact, all the time goes across many sectors, especially the personal side of things. So it's I kind of see it as a skill rather than a specific niche sort of area, in that sort of sense of things. My background is really, I've been working now for projects 25 years. Got over 100 projects now under my belt. I first became an accidental project manager, I guess, like a lot of us do. I started out as a designer, and I worked up to running projects, leading project teams, running project departments, both for users and suppliers. So I've seen kind of both sides of the spectrum, which is good. And yeah, so about, I suppose, I was leading the project team, 20 odd project managers at the time, and I kind of got to the point where actually I've got to this point of knowing but actually not knowing, and I kind of set myself on a journey to actually really understand project management and get into the nitty-gritty of what it is and how to make it better and how we all can all make it better. And about 3 years ago, I set Cowshed Projects up. It's predominantly a practice in consultancy, but I also have a PMO side, a project management office, which is there to kind of help small businesses and accidental project managers just improve things in small ways, so we can all make our businesses and projects better, because the two are very much linked in. And yeah, so that was set up 3 years ago, and it's been a slow build sort of ever since. And I kind of offer help and advice, and I blog, and there's socials, and I've got a podcast called Sit in the Corner Looking Pretty, which is kind of aimed, it's a very short 10-minute kind of podcast that gives just little tips, tricks, techniques, ideas that can help you get slightly better. Not big things, just small things.
Well, it's just how I think we connected back again after so many years. And I love the podcast because I think everyone's really time poor, and kind of the reason why we kept it to 30 minutes today is that not everyone has time to listen to podcasts that are like an hour and a half. So I think it's ace. So we'll obviously send that resource later on to you. So thank you for your intro. I'm keen to get started with the 3 topics. So the first one we're going to handle today is stakeholder management. So we've all been there, whether your project team is 15 or whether it's 5. There's obviously certain people that have the responsibility to sign projects off and the buy-in from the project team, etc. And obviously that has challenges in itself. So for the people that are either project managers or accidental project managers on the call today, how would you suggest that people plan for those situations the best to get the most buy-in, sign off?
Yeah, well, it's, especially at the start, and if you're working externally to an organization, it can be quite difficult.
Well, I think, I don't know if that's me, but you're breaking out up a little bit, Simon, there. To get
attention and stuff. But I suppose there's 2 things really that actually in any situation, if it's me that stopped or not. But
I think it might be your end.
Sorry, I've been in many situations where it's actually not the person who's higher up that actually. Are we back on?
We're all right. You keep going. Just okay. A bit cracky, cool. That's all.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So first of all, it sounds obvious, but establish it's the right person that you're actually speaking to. That might sound obvious, but it's not always the person at the top you need to get decisions made or will make decisions, and they're often going to just pass it on back down to the person who's making decisions. And that's kind of really at the start is trying to get your roles and responsibilities just understood, and your communications in place, so that you kind of communicating to the right person to agree in those at the start of projects. So that's kind of a very kind of basic kind of level, but it's something that actually sometimes we just take for granted and need to assess. But the other thing is to make sure that if you've got the right person, it's easy to speak, it's easy for them to respond and answer. We're all, as we said before, time poor, and the easier you can make it for people to respond to your requests or your decisions, then the better. So a quite good technique that I use, and people might know it, is SMART, which is a communication technique. SMART stands for it's an acronym, so you break that down to making sure that your communication is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. That's how it breaks down. And it's really quite good technique for making sure that you're being efficient in getting the information you want, but also getting the information comes back to you is efficient from the person that you're requesting the information or the request or the decision from. So if I quickly break that down, people who don't know about SMART, it's specific means that your request is actually, as it suggests, specific about what you're requesting. So you are making sure that it's in the context of what you're asking. It's not too fluffy around the outside, and it's very tempting to be put lots of pleasantries in if that's kind of how you feel about things and stuff. But sometimes, waffle can get in the way of actually knowing what getting the right answer back, and confuses people sometimes. So make sure it's specific. Measurable means that when you request, you kind of asking for it in a way that you want it back. So it's measurable in terms of how it comes back to you. So you might want some figures in an Excel document. You might want them in another kind of format, as just as an email, or so. Just make it measurable so you can measure how. So it's basically measuring the format it comes back into to you, which then helps you as well get the answer you want at the end and in the right format. So you don't have that situation where, I've got to now do more work to try and get it out, get it in a different way. Achievable is again, sort of, it might sound obvious, but it's making sure that it actually can be delivered by the person. So it's tempting to ask for, well, it's not also tempting, but it's good. Sometimes you ask for too much and it can't be done, which just means that the person who's requesting it hasn't got anywhere to go with the responding. So it's making sure that what you're asking for is achievable. Relevant, again, so that's making sure that everything in there is relevant to what you're requesting. It's very tempting to put 5, 6, 7 different requests into one request that aren't associated with each other, and that will slow down your responses, because the person has to try and pick all these together. But also it might mean that they don't respond because they can't answer one of them. So yes, sometimes it's good to put everything in if it's in the right context, lots of questions in one request, but just be aware that that's not helping the other person get it back to you quickly. So if you want something really quickly and it's very specific, then try and keep that as one request to the person, which I find works really well. And then time bound, and this comes back to a bit about being achievable as well, is always ask for it to be within a certain, the time that you want it in. Now, that might need testing that it's achievable. Don't, again, if you ask for it for tomorrow and it's not achievable until a week. So it's always good to say, I would like it back by Tuesday, but if this isn't possible, can you please tell me when it's possible? It gives
not the ASAP that many people.
No, and I'm terrible for sometimes using ASAP as well, and then just having to kick myself and go, oh no, actually must give someone a little bit of guidance, so at least it's in the remit of what's achievable. I think the other thing with achievable and time bound is if you sometimes put too many deadlines that are ahead of the game, that can be sometimes counterproductive, because if someone understands that you're doing that, then they'll start ignoring your deadlines. So try and keep it as honest as possible, those kind of requests.
If you've got this, the key principles of SMART in place, and you've your key stakeholders, you've done that at the kickoff meeting, but then you've realized you're maybe a month in or 2 months in or longer in many projects, and things are just not, you're just not getting the answers back, and you can tell that someone in the project team are not bought into the project. What would your solution be before we move on to the next session?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to come back to the first point of the last sort of answer really is to just double check that it's the right person that's actually needed, that you're asking the request of, because things do change. It's like personal circumstances change sometimes within companies, and also what sometimes at the start of projects you set with all the best will in the world, you set off with people being responsible for things, but that sometimes shifts. So it might sound obvious again, but just double check and ask people in the organization that you're now pretty more familiar with, is this the right person? I'm trying to do this. you know, this is the right, that's kind of a good, just have those little kind of conversations about it. Why aren't they responding to me? Because there might be a very good reason. You know, might not just be business, might be personal related that they're not responding. And then also just check how you're communicating with them, because we all have different preferred ways of communication, and we kind of, especially the more busy and more focused you are, people tend to stick to one form of communication as their preference, that is their go-to. So it comes back to, again, making it easy for them. Some people will much prefer to have a phone call. Some people will just work through emails, and that's how they do. Some work through various social channels or social media, will respond better in that way. So I think if you're in that hole, which, you know, it does happen, and it's happened to me in lots of situations, projects, check it's the right person still, and then make it as easy for them to respond as possible, again, by making sure that you communicate with them in the way that they want to, not just the way that you want to.
I think that's some really good points there. The one key sort of takeaway for me would be, just because you have a process at the beginning of the project and you covered all those points at the kickoff meeting, they need to be almost factored in each time you have a project meeting, just to check that how you're communicating and who you're communicating to is still going to work most effectively, really, for both parties. So the next subject that came back from our research, which I know is going to resonate with everyone on the call, is expectation management. I always use the analogy of, like, you book a hotel room, or you pay for something on Amazon, you think what you're going to get, and then it comes through the door and you open the parcel and you're like, that's nothing like what I was sold. And for many people that are on the call, if they work in sales roles, they might say, well, how can I influence the latter when my job is to sell the product? And if you're maybe a project manager or implementation manager, you're at the other end, where the top team's been sold something to the client, and now you're picking up the pieces. So what would you do in terms of planning to avoid problems around expectation management?
I think from my experience and through working through various things, scope is such an important element of expectation management and change management, and understanding that scope and what you're delivering and what the other people are delivering. So both from a user and a supplier side, really, it is kind of possibly the one area where we do get stuck in the mud quite a lot, because we interpret what we think is slightly different to what someone else thinks, and, you know, you probably wouldn't ever fully get away from that. But scope management is the most important thing, really, to start off with. And you don't have to define the entire scope of what you're delivering at the start of a project. And so often projects have a design phase, or a more of an understanding phase, especially from clients who aren't very up to speed with what they're asking for, maybe, or what they want. So a scope document, I mean, in a project world, you sometimes call it a project chart or something that follows the project through. So, I mean, it's very key, even the sales stage of things, is to start documenting at the start what you are delivering. And that needs to be a shared open document so that everyone has part of it. I sometimes or very often have it as part of my reporting process. That scope document sort of follows through the project and develops as you go along and gets more detail into it. But especially at the start, and coming back to that sort of sales process, or that when you're buying something, just have something that includes things like I call the soul of the project, which is really the purpose of the project, because that really helps focus and something to refer back to as you go along.
So like that overarching, objectives.
Yeah. What is the purpose of doing this thing? What are the objectives from the client's point of view of doing this project? It can be quite simple. It could be quite complicated. It could be just we want to, because we need a new, on a very simple level, we want a new table. Well, we need a new table to sit at. But then you can always go into things like, well, it's for eating at, or it's for a meeting. It's for, so that's a very simple way of doing it. But that's sort of the basis of what the soul of what you're delivering is, and it's kind of helps then everyone else as you move through the project. So yes, the purpose, objectives, responsibilities, as we sort of talked about before, start putting those down. So who's responsible for decision making, who's responsible for delivering a little bit, and and also deliverables. So deliverables are probably the thing that you will develop more and get more focused on, but that's obviously quite important. But this document needs to really follow the project through. So it's not a right, we've done it, put it in a drawer. It's a right, we're starting off, we're going to develop it, and it moves with who's responsible for running that project, say from the sales through to the project team, through to production or whatever, whoever is the programming side of things.
What I'm kind of hearing is that rather than there being two stages where it's the sales stage and then implementing the whatever's being sold, is that really there should be more some I can't even say that word, continuity between the two stages.
Yeah.
And so that, you know, sales and project management and implementation, depending on whether it be a website or a design build project or tech implementation, is more seamless between the two. What if though, like we've all been there, we've got these best laid plans, you've done a really good requirements document that turns into a really good project plan, and then you get that moment when somebody sticks their hand up and go, this is not what I thought I was guessing, and it can cause a lot of tension. I've seen it in my previous world of being a supplier. How do you deal with those situations?
And I think probably we've all been there, and this comes back to, again, it's people's understanding of what's being delivered or lack of understanding what can be delivered in the process as well at the same time. So this is why the scope document is really kind of important to bring through, because it gives a measurable, agreeable benchmark for what's coming up. But even within then, maybe we might be into things in there might be interpreted differently. I think it was in a design world, it comes as drawings, but it becomes otherwise as written specifications and those sort of things that form that basis of the scope and get the detail into it. But the most important thing I think when that happens is not to be defensive. It's very tempting to go on the back foot and go, oh no, you're not getting that, you can't get this. Or the other way is to go, I'll just give it all away, which is not great for the business. That's not what you should do either. So once you start don't be defensive, communicate more and more regularly in these circumstances to show what you're doing, what can be done. And it's really important to say no, but no, but. So we can do this, this, and this. It's also really important to explain in a kind of very simple language what is being delivered, because we all get into sort of business mode or work mode. We're in our sort of specific bubbles, and we speak in our own language, because it makes it so much simpler for us to communicate in that kind of way.
Yeah.
So,
but not with the client.
Yeah, for a client point of view, it might be alien to them, and they might even be sometimes too embarrassed to ask, well, what's that mean? Or they might assume that it means something different to what it means in your world. So try and get things simple, communicate more, say no, but what can be achievable, what value you can give in that circumstance. And it's almost trying to focus them on the positive of what can be done, as opposed to negative and saying you can't have anything, so.
Because as projects go on, you might get the gap where what they thought they were buying and what they are getting in certain features or functionality or services, whatever it may be. But there also might be things that they didn't realize they were getting, which is a plus, an added value, So good to spin it both ways. So I'm keen to talk about managing change, because this was something that came up time and time again in our research. And it's that, age-old thing that we're all different, aren't we? Different people, and it's a lot to do with project management is dealing with people and different characters and behaviors and personality types. So when you're managing a change, so you're taking, your company or that organization from point A to point B to try and give them extra benefits of whatever you've sold them, how do you effectively manage change if you're the project lead or project manager?
Yeah, I mean, it will sort of to different degrees have some resistance to change, and that's probably a good thing in some ways, because it questions things. But the most important thing when you're trying to move change through is not I mean, I wanted to say push change through. That's not the way to do it. You bring change through, but you need to keep the people informed, and it's not just the person who's running the project or who's commissioned the project. It's all the people that it affects. Now, I'm not saying that you should invite everybody in relation to every meeting that you get into, but you need to somehow keep them involved and informed. So if you have a report that that shows progress, then send that on to people. Keep them there. If the part of the project you're in involves them, then bring them into the meetings. But it's also really important to speak informally to a lot of people. So it could affect even like the person who's on the reception desk or accounts and things. And it's really just to have lots of kind of informal conversations, but treat them more as a listening conversation than a telling conversation, because when you're speaking direct to people and you're letting them express what they feel about things, you'll find out why they're resistant to change. And there's probably some very valid reasons why they're resistant to this thing happening. And then you need to bring those into the project, because if this thing's been tried 3 times before and there's a reason why it's failed each time, then and you're doing the same thing, then it's probably going to fail again. So
they might be bringing extra baggage, I guess, as well, Simon, from like a previous job where projects have not gone very well.
Exactly, yeah. And everyone's got, they don't generally, well, I think all the time there's a reason why people resist something. So if you can find the reason, then you can find the solution to things. Obviously, you can't please everybody. So if things are going away that they're resisting, then it's trying to make it explain to them how it's going to benefit them and how it's not going to be as negative as they are initially perceiving. So it's the more you speak to people, the more you listen, the more you take their side of things on board, the more they'll be on board with the change as well.
I think it's interesting that now we sit in this world where so many meetings are online. You see a different side of people's characters, don't you? Because in an environment like this, if everyone was now on the screen trying to have a conversation together, there's usually always a certain type of person that gets spoken, gets heard. And the sort of quieter, more introverts don't get heard. But when you have meetings in-site meetings and you get to have individual meetings, it's much easier to get those kind of characters out. I read an excellent book a few years ago called Surrounded by Idiots. The title of it sounds a bit derogatory, but actually it's very good. And I know you've read that book too. And that kind of like identifies like our personality types and behavior types by colors. And I think like I totally 100% recommend that book if you manage teams or projects, because just like you said, if you can work out what people do and how they behave, you'll work out the ones that are the decision makers or the knee-jerkers versus the people that need to be guided through processes.
No, it's a very important part of also bringing through change and speaking to people is to understand how they're going to react to things in certain ways, and also to get information out of people. I mean, as you say, that it is a very good sort of foundation of a book to understand people, because it gives you the I guess it's the black and white, so there is a bit of grey in between all this sort of stuff. It doesn't give you the we're not all the same, but people, we'll find the people that come along and are very upfront and very to the point and move things along, and those sort of people in projects you find you have to let them be how they are, sort of keep everything quite direct, but you also need to make sure that you understand that actually in being direct and being sort of quick and moving things forward, you do miss things. So it's just being aware to deal with that, but not bog it down with having long conversations, get upset about the fact that you've only had two minutes and they said, "Oh, do it this way, it's easy,"
Yeah.
But also the side of things is there's lots of people, and it's probably predominant according to sort of the research and stuff. A lot of people kind of more fence sitters. They like to take on what's going on around them and take things in, and they've got a lot to give, but they won't necessarily bring it up in the face of someone who's very blunt and getting on with things. So those sort of people are people are really good to, you know, have a side conversation with, ask them, you know, do you really think, what do you think to this, what do you think to that? And they're probably, you'll find a lot more out that way from those people, and how to manage the change as well.
And also continuing that, because I find that sometimes you can end up, you have that dynamic at the beginning of a project when you're doing a sort of discovery and you've got everyone around a table, and then it can go forward into a project and you just end up talking to the project lead the whole time, so that you're relying on them, often finding the right information from the right people. What if you have these great plans in place and you think you've got it covered, but then you're just getting resistance? Hopefully it's not resistance from the organization, but resistance from some key people in the project team, and then it's causing like friction because you can't get your deliverables out. How would you deal with that?
Well, I think this could really come, I think, back to the personality side of things, and it's how we all kind of interact. So if resistance is internally between people, there's going to be some sort of reason behind that, and generally it's possibly because they want things differently, more information or done differently. Kind of, especially when there's, you know, you get the kind of more the dreamers who are constantly thinking, what can we do, 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 and it feels like they're constantly changing things, but really they're kind of exploring things. And then you have other people that are a lot more, right, I need it this and this, and laid out and a lot more sort of detail orientated, and both are great, and you both need both sets in, you know, on projects to make things really work. But they are generally kind of, will find that they get really frustrated by each other. So you kind of almost end up like being the middle person to translate what they're doing into how the other person wants it. And so that's why it's really important to understand those kind of personalities. And again, it comes back to what we started, is making it easier for people to process and have the information and understand what's going on. So that's why. So yeah, so I think if you're in that situation, it's really just understand what that person wants and how they're reacting to things, and how they kind of they feel safe in moving forward with stuff, and trying to translate it into how to make them feel like, okay, I can work with this.
I think it's quite an interesting point that we land on here. Like, you know, we've been talking for half an hour. It's whizzed by, and we've kind of like landed on the fact that it's the behavior, the human skills, again, element of people managing. And how would you, before we go to Q&As, how would you sum up, say, in sort of like a couple of bullet points, what we've talked about today for everyone?
I mean, I think projects are about people, because they are for people. You know, the result is generally for people, and so we're kind of, people are very much involved in things. So communication is just really important, to just be aware of how you're communicating and the best ways to communicate. Make it as easy as possible, really, for people to answer you and do the bits that you want them to do. That's kind of a big important part of project management. And scope is really kind of a key thing in a project, is understanding and making sure that people understand what you are delivering, or what you can deliver, and that needs to be flexible. So it's quite tempting to be, right, I've done something, that's it, what we're doing. But project management and making projects really well is about that flexibility, is how you progress.
Yeah, I definitely would say that that's one of my takeaways from our conversations leading up to today, is that you can have the best laid process in the world, but you have to remember that every project is different. And as consultants, I definitely feel like that every client is different, so you need to stay flexible whilst trying to achieve the goals of the project. So I think it's time, because Kath's come back up, our trusted timekeeper, to go on to any Q&As, questions from the attendees. Kath.
So just to say, apologies if it wasn't clear at the beginning, if you do have a quick question, there should be a tab at the top that you see Q&A, so feel free to drop any in now. I actually have a question for you, Simon. Do you have any examples you can give us when you've had to adapt your people skills in a specific environment?
Yeah, I think these days I probably adapt my people skills in almost every project I walk into. I work in organisations and come into projects very kind of irregularly. That's not the right word I'm trying to say there, but anyway. But so when I walk into a project, the project team or a client team or a team, it's my first sort of thing is to assess actually how these people are going to react in certain ways, and you can kind of once you kind of look for the key kind of thing indicators, find out in the first few weeks really. So for instance, I've got a client now who is very much his personality is very kind of thinking of new ideas, constantly thinking new ideas, wanting to push things forward, but isn't necessarily all about the detail. The detail just, that overloads. So I've sort of adapted how I work with them so that I'm almost taking the bits that he wants to then refine it into something that can be delivered and is a bit more tangible, and then taking that and planning it forward for them. Other people have come in with exact plan at the start that I've worked with, and with them, you then need to make sure that the people who are putting the ideas in have that scope to put the ideas in, because I've often been on projects where you just want to get it delivered, but there's still a design phase to be into it. So you need those people who are thinking of the ideas and allow for time for them to actually deliver it. You can't expect them to turn to a meeting and go, right, that's it, we're doing that. You need to pre-prep them before a meeting so they can think through the ideas and the thoughts of what they want to do, so that then they can deliver it in that meeting. If someone's very much sort of ideas based, then one of the, not the worst thing, but the more challenging thing to do is to put them in that situation where they're suddenly thinking in a meeting if they've had a bit of time to think back beforehand, and that works really well too.
I guess that's kind of why we have agendas, isn't it? Even though sometimes it can be like, it seems like an unnecessary process when you're talking about the same things on project meetings, but actually if you're pulling people together that prefer to have a little bit more thought around what you're going to talk about and they can't think on the spot, that's why agendas.
Okay. And just one other quick thing that's quite useful thing that I use now all the time, because it's really important, is if you put in a meeting in a diary or putting a meeting out there, is always put in what the aim of that meeting is at the top of that meeting. So, the aim is to discuss the scope of works, or the aim is to sign off a plan or a program or something, just so that everyone knows why they're there. And they might think, actually, I don't need to be there, which is great. But if you don't give them that aim of the meeting beforehand, they haven't got that option. And they can't think about, okay, I'm focused now on what this meeting's for.
And also it stops probably 15 people coming to a meeting that perhaps they don't need to be at.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that none of us want to be in meetings where we just sit around just nodding our head, checking our emails.
Good question, Cass. Anything else?
We don't appear to have any in the Q&A.
If we haven't, I'm just really conscious of everyone's time and allowing us to be able to get on with the day. But I wanted to let everyone know that there'll be a follow-up email, obviously thanking you for attending today, but also a quick survey that we just want a snapshot of today, what you thought, be as brutal as you want to be. It's the very first in the series. Any feedback that you can get, ideas for future webinars around human skills, and if you have any ideas of future guests, that would be really great. We'll be also sending links for resources to our websites, to Simon's podcast, and also the recording. Lastly, Simon, I would love it if you could summarize for us. Summarize what you would, one quick takeaway you would give to the audience today that they can take into their work.
Well, from a project management point of view, flexibility is the key. You know, don't think that you've solved the problem from day one, because things change. So yeah, projects are about change, and they also change when you're in them. So flexibility is one of the most important things, and just try to get too frustrated about it, which is easier said than done.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Kath, for helping us get to this point. There's been a lot of work involved in a very short webinar, but and thank you, Simon, for being our first guest. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for all the attendees of coming. We hope you really enjoyed our webinar and you got something out of it, and you can take it into your working day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.